Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for joining me for the Astro-Living Q A. I just came up with the title because I was thinking about maybe kicking it off by talking a little bit about the concept of astro-living and how astrology lets us predict without even looking at charts. That's really useful for human behavior and human interactions. So, for example, just to give you one example, because I want to see what kind of questions pop up. So the questions are open to channel members. Feel free to go ahead and type in a question if you have it. Of course, if you're watching live. So for example, about this astro-living thing, I mean, there's kind of like a lifestyle to astrology. Welcome, Yash. It's kind of like a lifestyle to it, and it's not just like cultural lifestyle. It's kind of like astrology informs the way that we see. So, for example, when you see somebody behaving like uncooperatively, let's say, then when you're astro-living, what you're seeing is Mars in action. You're actually just seeing Mars moving this person. And the benefit of that is that you can predict the future without looking at any charts. Of course, it's not foolproof, but no predictions are foolproof. But it's very useful and it's very accurate. So if you see negative Mars acting out in an individual, then you know that the other things, because they're being uncooperative, then you know that that same person is going to deliver other negative traits of Mars. And so if you're expecting to get in a fight with somebody, it would be that person. Or if you were expecting somebody to get angry, right? Or just to storm off and go off on their own. So that's an example like how you would see one thing that's associated with the planet, and you can predict that more of the similar things associated with the planet will come from that same individual, whether good or bad, and regardless of what planet it is. So that's one example of what I mean by astro-living. Hey guys, Aurora and Ariane. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to let them go. Let them rip. So also you can do, it doesn't have to be with planets. Astro-living, astro-informed experiencing doesn't have to be only with planets, of course. It can be with signs, houses. It can even just be with even more raw material, like elements. You know, if you're a very earthy type of person and you see another person exhibiting watery behavior, then you know that you should go and be friends with that person. But if you're a very earthy person and you see a person acting very fire-ish, then you know you're not going to be good in intimate cooperation. So that's what I'm talking about. Hey, Aurora. Yeah, so I tried to do this live stream at an unusual time for me. It's 8 p.m. for me because of exactly what Aurora is saying. Wanted to give some other people chances to come on. But then, of course, you have people like Ariane that just come at any time. Yash also. So today, I'm always kind of scared to meet people. Just as an astrologer, you're kind of scared that people are going to realize that you're an astrologer and then just start asking you for advice. That's what I mean by scared. Because it's A, uncomfortable, and B, like impossible, you know. So today I went out. I found a new Pakistani store and I went on and I got some ghee. But the guy there, was obviously pretty interested what I was doing there in Japan in a Pakistani store. The conversation came around to astrology, but I just kind of deflected it and left. So how would I see this guy? By Astro-Living. It would have been like a very Gemini person, right? So I have a moon in Gemini, so I don't mind that, right? So you don't have to know people's charts to know how you're going to get along with them. And I was actually able to deal with him without any undesirable things happening, because he's exhibiting a Gemini mood, and maybe a Sagittarian or a Gemini mood. And I have a moon in Gemini and a dominant Jupiter, so I'm good with both of those. That's what I'm meaning by astro-living. There's no questions popping up. How am I supposed to do a Q&A without a question? Maybe I could give you another example. Here. I'm studying in the field of forensic astrology. I'd love to know what do you mean by forensic? Maybe I should just look it up. Okay, now we got questions. We got one from Aurora, and we got one from Shin Pashari. Let me just quickly look up forensic. Oh, now we got tons of questions. Because forensic to me sounds like researching dead people. Uses astrology to decide, so it's like after things happen, right? Method that uses astrology to decide crimes, find missing persons, and analyze criminal events by examining charts. Wow. That's great. That's interesting. Let's see what the rest of the statement is. Aurora says, I'm studying the field of forensic astrology, but using my own method with your books as the basis. Thank you. So that's probably a segue or a lead in into your question. We'll see what kind of questions you have. Ariane says, in some of your earlier videos about synastry, you said that opposites kind of match well because they're kind of complementary. So yeah, that's a principle. If you look at, this is also part of astro-living, really. In order to effectively do astro-living, you have to really know the basics of astrology well, so that you can actually see them in the world and how the movements of the world are the tangible form of the abstracts of astrology. So if you look carefully at the zodiac, you should look at it from all different ways, like how is it constructed? Why are planetary rulers in the positions they're in? Why are elements in the positions they're in? Why are quadruplicities, triplicities? Why are the modes, triplicities in the places they are? Then you'll understand like how it all works together. So if you consider opposite signs, you will notice that they always have the complementary element. So they're not really literally opposite, are they? For example, if you go to the opposite sign from Aries, it's Libra. You go to the opposite sign from Taurus, it's Scorpio. So with Aries, if you're starting in Aries and you go to the opposite sign, you're going from fire to air. Starting Taurus and going Scorpio, you're going earth to water. That's the thing about opposite signs, right? So you need to know your elements. What the elements are about, you need to know that earth and water are complementary. Fire and air are complementary. And crossing those paths is non-complementary. That's how you can easily understand all the different compatibility configurations between signs. So to be opposite, like for example, for one person to be a Capricorn, another person to be a Cancer ascendant, you would say they have opposite ascendants. But elementally, they're not opposite. Elementally, they're complementary. Capricorn is earth, Cancer is water. And also the opposite signs always have the same, I think it's called triplicity. I call it the modality. whether it's cardinal, fixed, or dual. So the opposites, so they have some kind of thing that binds them together, some sameness that binds them together, which is their attitude towards action, their modality, and then they have this complementariness in their elementality, which is really basic and fundamental to how emotions work. Elementality is very fundamental to how emotions work, therefore very important to compatibility. Then you're just left with the fact that the planets, which are in the opposite signs, are truly opposite, right? You'll have Mars and Venus, for example, with Taurus and Scorpio. You'll have Saturn and, what would you have there? You'll have Venus and Mars with Aries, and both of them are, and then you'll have Mercury and Jupiter, Saturn and Moon, or Saturn and Sun. You get these opposites. So that's where the element of actual oppositeness comes in, when you have people with significant things in opposite signs. But it's not just complete oppositeness, it's oppositeness with this complementariness in the emotional thing and a sameness in the kind of movement style. So that supports the oppositeness. So there's the idea of opposites attract. The other person has what you lack, the other person has what you need. This is why in the classical sign-based compatibility system, the opposite attraction will be the most magnetic. It might not be the most secure always. Like, by secure, I mean like comfortable. It's the trine. The trine is the more comfortable compatibility between signs, but the most magnetic one is the opposite. Okay? Feel free to ask a follow-up question on that. Arya? L Sun T40 says, hello, I'm curious if Vedic astrology writings talk about dreams. I suppose the moon would be the planet associated. Mainly what else? So in other words, like you're trying to see dreams in astrology, right? Thank you, Alexander. Hey, Ayush. And Yash, don't worry. We don't need relevant questions. It's just an open free-for-all. There's nothing really to be relevant to. We'll just talk for like an hour. So Sun is asking about dreams in astrology. Actually, there's a lot of ways that you can get dreams. Basically, when you're dealing with water signs, you will be touching on themes that affect dreams, because the water signs reflect, talk about self-reflection and talk about imagination, therefore, the way you look into your own mind. That's what water signs are all about. So any water sign will have to do with dreams, and then depending on what planet you put in it and what condition the planet is put in it, you can see if a person is a daydreamer, a non-dreamer almost, like a light dreamer, a deep dreamer, a vivid dreamer, all kinds of things like that. Yeah. Then that's with the signs, with the houses, you would be in the same ballpark, because the water signs are 4, 8, and 12. The 4th, 8th, and 12th sign, Pisces, Scorpio, and Cancer. Similarly, the houses 4, 8, and 12 have connection with emotion and internalization. That's what they're about. So you'll also get relevant information pertaining to dreams from those houses. And then you mentioned the planet, the moon. The moon, of course, would be the one that's the most relevant to dreams in and of itself, because dreams are or what happens in the mind. The moon is the mind. So with that, maybe your question is answered. What else we got here? So Yash is asking, would wearing certain colors or surrounding with certain elements affect us in a prominent way? Definitely. That's also astro-living. You asked the most relevant question, more relevant than me. I didn't even think of that. But that's very relevant to topic of astral living. So my basic thing that I was trying to convey about astral living is it means that you can see astrology happening in life. You don't just, it's not just astrology on a page or on a computer screen or in a chart. It's astrology moving around in people, moving in the world. That's astral living. So for example, when you really know the basics well, then you see certain flavors, certain sounds. You see the planets and signs in those flavors and sounds and sights and so forth. You know, I don't like very bright places. I didn't even turn on a bright light for this live stream. You can probably associate that with certain planets and not with certain others, right? And that would also bring out the influence of that planet because the planet is in that. Like Saturn is in darkness or Moon is in darkness. It's not in a bright place. Saturn isn't in a bright place. Moon isn't in a bright place. Sun is. Mars may be. So if you are trying to, you know, whatever you want to, however you want to say, get more in touch with or bring out more Mars, more Sun in you, then stick yourself in bright places all the time. If you're trying to tone that down, or if you just, you know, or if you want to tone up the Moon and Saturn, then you bring yourself in darker places. And it's not even about what you want to do, it's just what will feel natural to you. And kind of like a lot of problems in life go away when we're able to accept what feels natural to us. Because a lot of times we're too busy to notice that something feels natural or unnatural, or we're too ashamed or too much stuck in our head to realize that this feels natural. But maybe that can help you. Like, you know, if you have a lunar or Saturnian rising sign, then you're probably going to feel natural to have subdued lighting. Whereas if you have a solar or Martial rising sign or whatever, then you'll probably feel more natural in bright spaces. So what you mentioned specifically was like smells, colors, objects, species, food. Paladipika has lists of all those. The part of Paladipika that I published in a book, which is called Essentials of Vedic Astrology, I think. Fundamentals of Vedic Astrology, something like that. You can find it at victicare.com/books. That has all that information in there, so you can, you know, for example, there's certain scents. I forget them now, actually. Forget them now, but there's certain scents that bring out different planetary influence, because the scents are the planet. The planet is the blueprint behind what makes that scent. Flavors as well. Flavors I remember well. You know, saltiness is lunar. Like acridness, the bitey spiciness is Martial. No, Mars is bitter. Sun is that spiciness. That kind of mellow flavor is Mercurial. Sweet is Jupiter. What's the other? Astringent is Saturn, and sour is Venus. So, you know, if you're thinking, I wish I was more Venusian, then go eat a lemon. You know, go eat a lemon, go smell a lemon. Well, you know, maybe eating a lemon is a little bit barbaric, but how about some lemonade? Think about lemonade now. Here's Astro Living for you. What's a lemonade? It's a Jupiter-Venus conjunction. So stuff like that. Colors especially are useful because humans are fairly eye-oriented. So again, you need to know the colors if you want to decide. But you know, you'll just naturally gravitate towards your color, which is probably the color of your most dominant planet. And some people like black. It's probably because they have a lot of Saturn in their chart. The other colors are, Venus is one which is not really tied down to a particular color. But Venus is particularly fond of sparkle. So Venus will not really tie itself to a singular color. It will be multicolored and have a lot of glitter or sparkle to it, like a lot of shine. Jupiter is like a yellow, like an orangish yellow. And you'll notice effects. So I remember when I was in elementary school or junior high school, they started handing out this yellow paper with lines on it. And we were like, what's this yellow paper? And the teachers were like, studies have shown that yellow increases your attention. Guess what color is yellow? Yellow, like an orangish yellow is Jupiter and a greenish yellow is Mercury. Hello. Of course, it's going to increase your attention. In Japanese, we call yellow the kiro, the color of spirit, the color of the color of consciousness, the color that brings out your attention. So yeah, Jupiter, that's Jupiter, Mercury. Mars obviously is red. Moon is white. Sun is like brown. I think I covered them all. So there you go. Let's see what Aurora asked. Isn't it amazing that what we see as the great malefic is counterparted by the luminaries? Does that also play into the nature of Saturn as silver lining, so to speak? Isn't it amazing that what we see as the great malefic is counterparted by the luminaries? Why would you say it's counterparted? I agree with you, but why? It would come from basically knowing that Saturn's domain is opposite to the luminary domain. Saturn's Capricorn and Aquarius are opposite to Cancer and Leo. That would clue you in right now that they're counterpart or they're opposites. Also Saturn is just, everything about Saturn is not luminous. But why is it amazing? I would think that it's not particularly amazing. It's natural, and that there's nothing about being a malefic which is contrasted with being a luminary. Malefics can be luminary or not, Malefics aren't necessarily dark. Malefics are tough. This is why, if you ask most people, they'll wind up classing the sun with the malefics. Because even though the sun is not really a malefic, but most people will treat the sun with the malefic or lump it in with the malefics. And that's because the sun is strict or tough, or it's harsh, like it brings out harsh shadows. It makes things very contrasty. And that's what malefics do. They're black and white. They're yes or no. They're right and wrong. They're not forgiving and they're not gentle. But they're very strong. That's what a malefic is, very strong. So what I would rephrase your question is, it's pretty amazing that Saturn's Aquarius is opposite from the sun's Leo. What I think is more interesting is that Saturn's Capricorn is opposite from the moon's Cancer. I'm not sure why I see that as amazing. I think it's just interesting, really. And to see the opposites in those signs is really important. In Leo, you have consolidation of authority. But in Aquarius, you have dispersion of authority. In Leo, you have confidence in your decision. In Aquarius, you have faith or trust in someone else's decision or in a group decision. And in Leo, you draw people to look at you, but in Aquarius, you look out at other people. So you can see the contrast between the two. Now, if you look at Capricorn and Cancer, the contrasts are interesting. They're on completely different themes, even though you're still involving the planet Saturn. With Capricorn and Cancer, it's a theme. First of all, it's a theme of work versus rest, because Cancer is dreamy and it has to do with sleep, whereas Capricorn is worky. So you have that. In Capricorn, you just go out and get things done. In Cancer, you stay in and rest or rejuvenate or refresh yourself. Capricorn also looks out like Aquarius does, but Cancer looks in. It's not the same as Leo, which is Leo is pulling others to look towards it, inward towards it, but Cancer is itself looking in. And then also, Cancer is quite private, but Capricorn is quite public. It's quite open. It doesn't really have reservations because it doesn't really care. Whereas Cancer is so carry, so it has lots of reservations. So I think those are interesting dynamics about the opposites between the Saturn signs and the luminary signs. Ayush asks, regarding the story of Vivishwan Surya and his wife Sanjana, who was the daughter of Vishwakarma, does Saturn retrograde have something to do with Shani, his son with Chaya, the shadow self of Sanjana? As Saturn is always 190 degrees away from the sun, either side as Saturn retro and station direct. Okay, let me see if I can understand this question. This is an elaborate question. So you got the story of Vivishwan and Sanjana, that they produce a child called Chaya. Now I have to refresh my memory on this, but Vivishwan has several children. Yama. Yeah, Yama, Chaya, and Shani. So Chaya is a shadow. The sun makes a shadow. Yami is a river. The sun creates rivers. Believe it or not, the sun creates rivers. And if you live in nature, you get to know this, but it's the heat of the sun which pulls water from the ocean and drops it on the land. And that's what creates rivers. And then Yama is actually the borders of the days and the nights, the twilights. So you get those three children. Then you had the incident where Sanjani, Vivishwan's wife, was just getting too sweaty, being the wife of Sun. The Sun is too overbearing. And this is important for astrology too. When the Sun goes wrong, symbolically, it's just too much. It's just too overbearing. It's just too much heat. It's not easy to be around that person when the Sun is not good in their chart, or when they're not having a good Sun day. So similarly, what's her name? Sanjana, she wanted to take a vacation. So she did. Who knows where she went? Maybe she went to her mother-in-law's apartment. But she went somewhere. But she didn't tell anybody. So she created a clone, left it behind, and then she went on a break. And the clone was doing all of her activities as normal, including having another baby with her husband, Surya Vivishwan. That baby is Shani. That's Saturn. And there, because it was a clone and not the real one, there's slight imperfection in DNA. So Saturn has some slight, Shani has some slight handicaps. Like one leg is a little shorter than the other one. And some frailty, some kind of sickness. So that's the basic story. Now, I think what you're doing is conflating Chaya and Shani. So, because what you're asking is, does Saturn retrograde has something to do with Shani, his son with Chaya. Chaya is the wife. I need to refresh it. Chaya was the doppelganger, the shadow self of Sanjana, like you said. As Saturn is always. So I'm so sorry, but I don't understand the question. Shadow self of Sanjana, because Saturn is always 109 degrees away from the sun. That's very interesting, isn't it? Saturn is always 109 degrees away from the sun, either side at Saturn retro and station direct. But does 109 have something to do with the shadow? I'm not sure. But anyway, at least we got to talk about that fun story. If you want to re-ask the question or reword it, because somehow it didn't sink into my head. See you later, Ganga Purnima. Ayush says, I have a sun. Okay, I have a sun opposition Saturn retro, and I'm interested in what Saturn actually does in retrograde. We talk about this a lot. Really, people always ask questions about retrograde. Somebody asked me last live stream, why there's so many different opinions about retrograde. My answer was there's different opinions about everything because astrology is in ruins because of what has culturally happened to it over the past 2 millennia. However, basically, retrograde is very simple. It just indicates that a planet is going against the flow, the normal flow. Not its normal flow, but the flow of things. So the energy of the planet will be used to like fight against things or change things when it's retrograde. Okay? And if its sun is opposite to that Ayush, it's pretty interesting. The sun is opposite to that Saturn, then it's pretty interesting because that's giving some capacity to that retrograde Saturn to really change things because it's getting that leadership power from the sun. That's what I think, just envisioning that combo in my head without the rest of the chart. Ariane says, how does this apply internally to people born in the edges, borders, Gandanta or Sandhi with very contradictory positions? For example, trying to fire in the Rashi and the Vamsha rising in Cancer. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by this, but let's just take the question without the this. What about people who are born at the borders of signs? Well, what border are you in? If I live in the border of Japan, I still live in Japan. But I will meet a lot more Russian people because I'm in the border of Japan, or I'll meet a lot more Koreans. Of course, Japan is not a good example because we're an island. You know, if you live in the border of Tennessee, then you're going to interact with Kentucky, I guess. If you live in the border of New York, you have a lot of business in New Jersey, but you're still in New York. So with astrology, if you're at 1 degree of an Aries, you're an Aries. If you're at 29.59 degrees of Pisces, you're in Pisces. However, there are these other things, which is the Gandanta or the Sandhi, which means that regardless of whatever sign you're at, regardless of whatever sign you're in, to be close to the edge carries its own effect, which is independent of the sign. Like it's universal, doesn't really depend what sign it's in. And so what does that affect? Kind of being in the border of a sign will usually disempower the planet that's in that place. Because the planet is like not wanting to still be in the sign that it's in, and it's not really yet in the other sign yet. So we'll just kind of sort of not do much. If you look at Avastas, the planet's either going to be super old or super young. That's another way to see it, when it's at the borders of a sign. And so it'll be just like a newborn infant or a super old person, not really able to do that much stuff on its own. The reason why I say usually that's what happens is because it depends how many things are at borders of signs. I've seen people that really do accomplish a lot, that have a lot of things at borders. And the reason for that is the more things line up, the more they become dominant, the more they synergize with each other. So if you're having a lot of things at the borders, then it kind of contradicts that principle of things losing their influence at borders, because they're gaining the influence back by getting aligned with everything else. Then the other one is the special border between water and fire. So the border between Pisces and Aries, or Cancer and Leo, or Scorpio and Sagittarius. It's not like a whole different thing than a regular border. It's just that this border is particularly difficult because the planet has to make such an abrupt emotional change between these two very different elements, fire and water. So planets that are in that position, close to the border between fire and water signs, they symbolize kind of like a confusion, an uncertainty about who they are, which enables like a lot of potential for change, because there's a lot of experimentation going on to try to discover what this energy really is. You know, like if I have Venus in Gandanta, then I'm going to be doing a lot of sensual experimentation in my life. Because it's in Gandanta and it's not really sure how it feels. And just like a final note on this, it's generally you take about 1 Navamsha on either side of a border and consider it to be the tricky zone. That's about 3 degrees on either side of a border. That's kind of like where the red zone starts. But the closer that you really get to the border, the more pronounced the effect of being at a border happens. Then another part of her question was, what about very contradictory positions like trying to fire in the Rashi and the Vamsha rising in Cancer? Yeah, that's why, you know, these are the situations where having a very rigorous, systematic, scientific parse of a chart works wonders. So like the report that I'm working on right now, just like parses the whole thing, parses all the divisions, all the subcharts, and figures out those kind of things like what elements are really dominant and in what order and how are they conflicting or supporting each other. But basically, you're identifying one of the ways where you would notice like a conflict internally within the person. You know, we were talking earlier about how people can be compatible or incompatible with other people, but you can use the same principles to see how you're compatible or incompatible with yourself. In other words, how much conflict you have or how much harmony you have with your own personal traits. How much do some of your traits harmonize or conflict with your other traits? So in this condition, where, like I have a Capricorn ascendant and a Leo Navamsha. So it's kind of, it's not very harmonious. It's my ascendant. So you can start to derive a therapeutic interpretation from that and figure out what kind of action would need to be taken for the person. You have a fire, you know, a big fire trine in the main chart, but a water sign and rising in the Navamsha. Then it's like a hesitation is going to be there to act in a fiery way because you feel very watery at heart. But your external situations are driving you to take fiery roles. Let's see what else we got. We still have about 20 minutes to chat. Aurora says, me in Aquarius ascendant and Saturn first only wearing black is pretty accurate. Yeah. A lot of times I just ask people what their favorite color is. Like when I get charts, because I do my astrology mostly on the internet, it's quite different than the way it's done traditionally or in the olden days. In the old days are traditionally face to face with people. So your mind can do an incredible amount of intuitive and high-speed calculation work when you just by seeing a person, smelling them, hearing their voice, right? But you can't do that when it's over the internet. And the value of being able to do those kind of quick checks and calculations when your person is in front of you is you can see if you're in the right ballpark or not with your opinion of the chart. If you're looking at a person that doesn't look anything like the chart, then you step back and did you give me the right time, or what's going on? I need to check. This chart is not working the way it looks on the surface. Or let me think, did I miss something? Whereas if you're looking at the chart and it's matching exactly the obvious things about the people, then you're ready to answer their questions. So I have some questions that I ask people. Like if you do the personal consultation with me, with the personal query by email, I gather some information from you, like about your career, marriage, and education and talents and stuff like that, because I need to check that I'm looking at this chart accurately and I'm ready to answer your question. So one of the things that you could ask, which I do informally with people when we're just chatting and they're, jazzed by the idea that I'm an astrologer, is just ask them what their favorite color is or try to predict their favorite color. You can usually predict. Prediction is difficult though, because either you just have a knack for it or not. It's not really about your talent, but because there's so many different factors that could go into it. But using it as a check to see if the chart really is what you think it is a good idea. Alexander Dimitrov asks, how important is cross-compatibility? Okay, this is a great question. Compared to direct matches. Also, do cross ones carry different meaning, or is it just about scoring points? So I see there's a lot of interest in compatibility. And I've been talking with an old friend, Parisa Yazdi. If you're not aware of her channel, it's great. Parisa Yazdi. I'm thinking of bringing her back in to this channel to do some discussions on different things. And she came up with this idea of, or actually I mentioned this idea and she said, she was encouraging me, I have to do this, to develop the elemental compatibility report, because we both think that's really where it's at. Because most people, really what they care about is the emotional compatibility, and that's really the bottom line of compatibility. And that's what the elemental stuff shows. So I can see, I'm getting another confirmation that I need to do that, because I see how much interest there is in compatibility. So this particular question is cross-compatibility versus direct compatibility. So let me explain what that is. There's a traditional system, or like the way it's usually done for compatibility is you'll do those shape analyses that we talked about before about signs, whether they're opposite or trine, square or whatever. So for example, you would say Susie's ascendant is in Gemini and John's ascendant is in Taurus. So those are like in conjunct, or I don't know, whatever the Western term is for it. But it's like they're in 12 second houses, they can't see each other. So there's not much compatibility there. They're not going to understand each other well. And it pertains to their ascendant. So they're not going to really have like a natural affinity to the way the other person wakes up and goes to sleep and eats and does basic things and schedules their life. Versus if the ascendants were trying to each other, then they get along very easy. If they're square to another, they actually oppose each other. It's not just they don't understand. Like that, so on and so forth. So you can do that with any 2 points. You can take the ascendant and compare it to the other person's ascendant. And the points which are generally used is the ascendant, moon, sun, and Venus. But I did research on this several years ago. And there's other points that are in the research sample that I used. Some other points seemed quite important as well. But theoretically, you can do this with any points. You can check the Mars of the two people. But now, Alexander's question is, he's calling this direct compatibility, meaning from one thing in one chart to the same thing in the other chart. But there's also like cross-reference compatibility. So for example, if I have the moon in Gemini and you have an ascendant in Sagittarius, then we have something that would work between us. Even though it's from my moon to your ascendant. It's not from my ascendant to your ascendant. It still works. And the interpretation will go along the lines of what's actually involved. The emotional nature of person A fits in well with the practical lifestyle of person B because it's moon to ascendant. Okay, so this question is, how important are they? So my compatibility report, it's like several years old, but it was based on a lot of research. And like a lot of actual technical research, like testing different approaches and different calculations. And I bet you in that report, it explains, probably in the appendix, it explains exactly what the values are. But I've coded that and researched it so many years ago that I don't remember now. But I remember I gave them a slightly less significant impact, but they're still significant. So the cross-reference things are slightly less important than the main things, but not unimportant at all. And it's not just about scoring points. That's a whole Kuta system, is points based. But it's about showing you the nuances in relationships. It's not just, do you like this person or do you not like this person? It's not just, do you get along or do you don't get along? We get along with everybody in some way, almost everybody. At least in some way, there's some instance where we would get along. It's just that some people we most along with and some people we mostly do get along with. And then there's the nuances of what is it that you get along with this person. So these two people have everything out of alignment, except the one person's Mars is trine with the other person's Saturn. So they're going to maybe like sports, the same sports. Or they have the same kind of attitude about arguing. Or they have the same kind of like harshness and sarcasm. You know, I'm just trying to pick up some ways of making it real. Okay, so the cross compatibilities show more of the nuances. But I'm really looking forward to doing the elemental thing. Not sure when. It's probably number 3 on my list of things I'm going to do. Now I'm doing True Signs report, which will come out soon. We just put in a gigantic amount of effort into really clarifying all the planet and sign interpretations and fitting them into the positive negative format. But that I showed you a little bit about that in the last live stream. That one's going to be coming out first. Then I might do the same thing for houses. And then after that, I might do this elemental compatibility. Okay, we still have 15 minutes. Let's see at least 15 minutes. Let's see what's up. Hey, Bardo, thank you. Hey, Stormy, thank you for joining us. Oh, look, Katerina, you set your alarm and you woke up. I don't know who I missed. Yeah, wonderful. Follow-up comment on colors and aligning with natural self. I liked wearing black, but in a certain unfavorable events happened while I was wearing black. How to differentiate natural and feels good? First of all, it might be a coincidence. You have to bring that into, your logic. If the unfortunate thing happened as a result of things pertaining to Saturn, like if you were too dismissive or if you were too pessimistic about things and that caused, or if maybe too harsh or too cold, whatever, and that caused the problem, then yeah, it was because you were wearing these black clothes. And maybe feeling natural is not good for you because maybe the natural thing is that you have this messed up Saturn. So you would want to actually not give in to what's natural to you. You would try to want to modify it with something else softer, maybe more green or yellow color. So let's see. I'm going to look for new questions. Katerina asks, sometimes it seems like people are leading themselves with their Rahu placement. Like a subtle see, just today I did all the Rahu and Ketu in signed texts for the new report, and it was actually quite exciting and easy. Something about Rahu and Ketu makes them easy to interpret. It's because they follow this pattern, kind of a simple pattern. So you're asking, they seem to lead themselves with the Rahu placement like a subtle motivating undercurrent that drives the judgment of their circumstances. Is it always illusory? You know, I don't know if, you know, if you boil down the whole chart to just Rahu and Ketu, then Rahu would be the one that we want more of. I mean, Rahu is the one that makes us hungry, and Ketu is the one that makes us tired. So, elaborating on that, Rahu will be the thing that draws your hunger. But it does not even nearly come close to working in every chart. Because Rahu and Ketu are not typically that dominant in charts. It's only if they get into certain configurations with other planets that they get to be very dominant, especially when they get near the ascendant or the moon, that they get very dominant. But sometimes you'll be overreaching for an interpretation, which sometimes is fine. But sometimes you'll overreach for an interpretation by just looking at Rahu, just because you like to look at Rahu. It might not be appropriate for that particular chart. And the other thing, the reason why I say it can also be fine to do that anyway is because it's not like the interpretation would be wrong. It just might not be very significant to the person. So, yeah, I do agree that Rahu is the thing that we feel like we want more of. And I would say interpretation of that is mostly good with the sign that Rahu occupies. And then the Ketu is the one that you already had enough of. And again, the interpretation of that is mostly good with the sign. With the houses, not so. I haven't been as convinced that it works as well. Is it always illusory? No, it's not illusory. It's the thing that you want. It's the thing that you want more of. I have Rahu and Pisces. So I'm just like always hungry for some abstract, spiritual, philosophical, Piscean stuff. You know, break out anything. I don't care what culture it's from. I'll be interested in it. And I have Ketu and Virgo. It's not illusory. It's not illusory. It's nothing to do with illusory. Maybe if the person's Rahu is really bad, maybe if it's adversely affecting some stuff, then you'll get some kind of a negative sense of that hunger that Rahu has. Ketu, similarly for me, Ketu is in Virgo. I can't stand spelling. I can't, grammar. I'll just make up my own. Spelling, forget it. Planning, very difficult. Because I just don't want to be bothered with it because I have Ketu in Virgo. So it does work like that. You just don't know how prominent it's going to be in a person, because unless you know how prominent the Rahu Ketu is. Let's see what Stormy asked. I don't like how YouTube gives me all these different names for people. I wish it would just give me the same name all the time. So anyway, Stormy says, I was wondering about Ketu in the first house and Rahu in the seventh. It's cool. I mean, this is where Rahu Ketu become the important part of the chart. It's when they get close to the ascendant or they get close to the moon. I mean, you're in good company. Krishna has Ketu in the first house and Rahu in the seventh house. But under certain circumstances that the rest of us may not have. got like, I don't know, five exalted planets or something. And it's with an exalted moon. So the nodes will take dignity, a lot of dignity from the proximity planets, the planets that they're close to, and the dignity of those planets. So Krishna's Ketu in the first house is in proximity with an exalted moon, so that really improves the interpretation of that Ketu effect. It might not be the case for us. And I sort of typically find that it's easier to have Rahu aligning with the ascendant than it is with the sun and the moon. Easier on the native. But always you're going to get, you know, the possibility. Everything in astrology is a spectrum of positive and negative, and it's the duty of the interpreter to figure out where the thing falls on the positive and negative spectrum. But with Rahu, Ketu in first and seventh, you always get this possibility of really destabilized living, where you just do wild things sometimes. And you just make really abrupt changes. Or you just go out on a limb and, you know, that's when you go, wow, like risky. Now, if Rahu specifically is in seventh and Ketu in first, then we get the hunger. Now, I said this doesn't really work so well with the houses, but the basic interpretation is there. And the hunger is towards partners. So, for example, Krishna with Rahu in the seventh house, it's just thousands of romantic partners. And then Ketu in the first house. Yeah. So that can be great. Rahu in the seventh house can be great. You can have tons of romantic experiences. It's not a bad thing at all. Right? Or you can have great zeal and passion for interacting with people. It doesn't even have to be romantic. But then on the negative side of the spectrum, it's just like overexposure, like an overexposure and over-reliance on others. Over-reliance on others, maybe not just for practical things, but also for like emotional things. Ketu in the first just supports that because it's on the negative side. Ketu in the first is draining the self-image, or it's like negativizing the self-image or making it feel small. You had enough of yourself. Kind of feeling. You want to be somebody else. That's on the negative side, but on the positive side, having Ketu in the first house can be a lot like having a lot of Scorpio in your chart. It just makes you very mysterious, and like it gives you a great mystique, can be very attractive and magnetic. Kind of like when you feel like a person is unfathomable and you just need to know more about them. That's the feeling of a positive Ketu in the first house. So yeah, that's about Ketu in the first and Rahu in the seventh. That's the basic idea of it. And then you get specifics by figuring out the dignity of the two in those places and, you know, what else is going on in the chart. Bardo's here, the kind donation and a very cute fox. Lucas, thank you for joining the channel. Aurora says, mine is in the 12th conjunct moon, and people describe me as always hungry. Rahu conjunct moon is something I treat with much more sensitivity. As an astrologer and an interpreter, when I'm reading for somebody, you have to be careful with that. Whereas Rahu on the ascendant or Ketu on the ascendant is a little simpler. You know, it's just like what I expressed before, but Rahu with the moon, Ketu with the moon, it can be something you really need to carefully interpret. I don't even want to blurt anything out about it because it's very sensitive to figure out exactly what goes on. My moon is in 12th house Taurus. Ascendant also in Taurus. So also what I would recommend you try is whole sign astrology. Whole sign houses. The dynamic house system is kind of like a later invention of people as they were messing around with the astrological traditions. But the whole sign is simple. Like if your ascendant is in Taurus, then Taurus is your first house. And you have a moon there. exalted moon. So it is just like Krishna. It's not going to be in the 12th house. If it's in Taurus, it's still in the same sign, and the sign is the house. So anything in Aries would be in your 12th. So check out that whole sign house system. That's what I use. That's what I recommend. Ayush asks how to shed the original mindset about things and see the astro-living daily things so as to live it more fully. First of all, learn the astrological symbolism really clearly. Just like I'm learning Japanese. There's no way to learn it unless you actually speak it. But learning it enables you to speak it. Like, in other words, if I don't go out and talk to people at the store, then I'm not going to learn Japanese. Or if I don't try to, talk to a neighbor or something, I'm not going to learn it, right? But if I don't study it, I'm not going to be able to go and try to talk to these people. So trying to see the world with a new language is the same as trying to see it through the lens of astrology. First of all, learn the symbolism, the grammar, the vocabulary of astrology. How the vocabulary means what do these different things represent. And the grammar is what happens when they interact with each other. The more you learn that, the more, in order to learn it, you will have to try to see it in the world. Just like the more, in order to learn a language, the more you have to try to speak it. So just start trying to learn basic things, not like complicated techniques or how you interpret charts. Try to learn what the sun does and doesn't represent, and how are all those things connected to some root symbol, and why. What does it have to do with the sun? Get those things down and then start to see it making sense in people and things and activities and places and whatnot. That's how you make it a part of your life. All right. I think maybe Lucas wanted to ask a question, so I might wait around for Lucas, give Lucas a chance. Does that make sense about how to become Astro smart glasses, Astro smart glasses, Apple smart glasses? Let's just give it another minute. So who joined us? Oh, let's see who the top fans are. Oh, Bardo. You won, Bardo. Somehow you got 200 XP. I think it was because of that kind donation. Katerina's in second place. Or tied with Yash. I think they're judging how many times you commented. Then we got Ayush in fourth, Aurora in fifth, and Ariane, you're down in sixth place. This is fun. At the top 10. That's cool, actually. Ayush, I like your profile picture. Okay, let's see if there's any new statements. Okay, thank you, Lucas. Unfortunately, it looks like we're about done because we've been doing this for about an hour. I'm gonna go finish studying Japanese for the day, and then I got to finish, or not finish, but do more work on my Yoga Sutra translation. So what I'm up to now is I'm done translating everything, and now I'm like elaborating on different concepts, key concepts in there. It's getting close to finishing, and I got to do some fifth canon translating for Ariane and Ariane's pupil, Bardo. We're talking about the hells of the universe. We're reading the Bhagavad Purana on hells. Second module, the true science module, expected in, I don't know. You never know what's going to crop up and be difficult, or what I'm going to realize I would be better off changing. But I would say a month to 2 months. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. I will probably see you next week for more of this casual and fun chatting. See you guys later.